You're at a party. Your partner is across the room. They're laughing. Someone you don't know, someone confident, someone leaning in a little too close, is making them laugh. You tell yourself it's nothing. You pick up your drink, you look away, and then you look back. That feeling that just moved through your chest, the tightening, the heat, the sudden hyper-awareness of everything happening in a 10-foot radius. You know exactly what that is. You've felt it before, probably more than once, probably more recently than you'd like to admit. We call it jealousy, and for most of human history, we've treated it like a character flaw, a sign of insecurity, something to be ashamed of, managed, suppressed. Therapists talk about it, relationship books warn against it, social media influencers tell you that secure people don't feel jealous. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Jealousy isn't a flaw. It isn't a bug in your emotional operating system. It is one of the oldest, most precisely engineered alarm systems your species has ever produced. And it was almost certainly saving human lives long before the concept of a relationship even existed. This is the story of where jealousy actually came from. Not the pop psychology version, the real version, rooted in archaeology, evolutionary biology, and 50,000 years of human survival. And by the time we're done, that feeling at the party is going to look very different. Let's start with what jealousy actually is, because most people, including most scientists for most of history, had it completely wrong. For a long time, the dominant view was simple. Jealousy was a social construct, a product of culture, something invented by possessive societies, reinforced by property law and religious marriage rights, and therefore something that could, theoretically, be unlearned. This was a comfortable theory. It meant jealousy was our fault. It meant we could fix it, if only we tried hard enough. The problem is the evidence doesn't cooperate. Anthropologists studying isolated, pre-industrial societies across 5 continents, from the Yanomamo of the Amazon basin to the Kungsan of the Kalahari, consistently found jealousy. Not the same rituals around jealousy, not the same rules, but the emotion itself, recognizable and present across populations that had never been in contact with each other. That's not a coincidence. That's a signal. When something appears in every human culture ever studied, regardless of geography, religion, economic system, or social structure, the standard scientific interpretation is not, they all independently invented the same mistake. The interpretation is, this thing is biological. This thing was selected for. This thing, at some point in our evolutionary past, helped our ancestors survive. Think about that for a second. An emotion as raw and as painful as jealousy, universally present across all of human history, was not an accident. To understand what jealousy was actually doing, you need to go back further than recorded history, back past the first civilizations, past the earliest agricultural settlements, back to the Pleistocene, roughly 50,000 to 200,000 years ago, when Homo sapiens were living in small nomadic bands. These groups were tiny. Anthropologists estimate somewhere between 30 and 150 individuals. Everyone in your world was someone you knew personally. There were no strangers. There were no cities. There was no infrastructure to fall back on if things went wrong. In that world, your survival depended on 2 things above everything else: resources and alliances. Food, shelter, protection, and the people who would help you secure them. Lose your resources, you die. Lose your alliances, you die. Lose the person who was your most important bond, your primary partner, in the language of evolutionary biology. And in many circumstances, you and your offspring face dramatically reduced odds of surviving to the next season. This is the context that made jealousy necessary. Not as a statement about love, not as a claim of ownership, as a threat detection system. finely tuned to the specific dangers of a small tribe world where losing a key alliance wasn't heartbreak. It was an existential crisis. Here's where evolutionary psychology gets specific, and specific is where things get genuinely strange. In 1992, psychologists David Buss, Randy Larson, Jennifer Semmelroth, and Drew Westerling published a study that would become one of the most cited and most debated papers in the field. They asked a simple question: what makes men and women jealous, and is it the same thing? The answer was not the same thing. When asked to imagine a partner's infidelity, men and women showed measurably different physiological stress responses: elevated heart rate, skin conductance, furrowed brow activity, depending on whether the infidelity was framed as sexual or emotional. The pattern, broadly, was this: men showed stronger physiological responses to the idea of sexual infidelity. Women showed stronger responses to the idea of emotional infidelity, a partner forming a deep bond with someone else. Buss and his colleagues argued this wasn't random. It mapped, almost perfectly, onto the specific reproductive risk faced by each sex in our ancestral environment. For a man in a small nomadic band, the core reproductive threat was paternity uncertainty. There was no way to confirm whether the children you were investing resources in were biologically yours. A partner's sexual infidelity created that uncertainty directly. For a woman, the parallel threat was resource withdrawal. Her reproductive investment, pregnancy, nursing, years of intensive care, required a sustained alliance with a partner who would remain committed and continue to provide. A partner forming a deep emotional bond elsewhere was the warning signal that that alliance might be redirected. Two different fears, two different evolutionary pressures, one shared emotion, calibrated for each. Now, the honest caveat, because this study has not had a smooth life in the literature. Subsequent research has complicated the picture considerably. Effect sizes have varied across cultures. Some replication attempts have found weaker patterns than the original. The specific claim about sex differences in jealousy is genuinely contested, and it would be wrong to present it as settled science. What the research does consistently support is that jealousy is real, measurable, physiologically grounded, and appears across all cultures studied, even when the specific triggers vary. The mechanism is ancient. The calibration differs by context. But here's the complication that rarely makes it into the popular version of this story. If jealousy evolved as a survival mechanism, it should be well suited to the environments in which it evolved. Small tribes, known individuals, limited alternatives, a world where the real threats to your pair bond were sitting right there in your 30-person camp, and you could see them with your own eyes. That is not the world you live in. You live in a world of 8 billion people, instant global communication, and the ability to form what feel like meaningful parasocial bonds with individuals you have never met. Your partner isn't threatened by the 30 people in your camp. They, and you, are navigating a social landscape your ancestors could not have conceived of. And your jealousy system? It hasn't been updated. It is still running the same ancient calibration. It still fires at perceived threats to your pair bond the same way it would have in the Pleistocene, with the same urgency, the same physiological intensity, the same assumption that the threat is immediate and the stakes are life and death. The threat detection system didn't evolve for Instagram. It didn't evolve for Tinder, for long-distance relationships, for co-workers who text at 11 p.m. It evolved for a world where the rival sleeping in the next cave was the actual risk. That's not an excuse for jealousy. That's an explanation for why it so often feels completely disproportionate to the actual situation. Why a single unanswered message can feel like a 5-alarm emergency to a nervous system that was built to treat social threats as survival threats. Here's the part that stops most people mid-thought. Jealousy, or something functionally identical to it, is not unique to humans. Behavioral scientists have documented jealousy-like responses in species as diverse as dogs, elephants, great apes, and several species of birds. A 2014 study at UC San Diego found that dogs showed measurably higher aggression and attention-seeking behavior when their owners directed affection toward a realistic stuffed dog, even though the stuffed dog was not actually a rival. The dogs didn't know that. Their behavioral system classified it as a threat and responded accordingly. In chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, sharing roughly 98.7% of our DNA, pair bond competition produces behaviors strikingly similar to human jealousy. Increased vigilance toward rivals, physical interposition between partners and potential competitors, and what primatologists carefully describe as mate guarding. None of these animals read relationship advice columns. None of them were taught to feel threatened by a rival's presence. The behavior emerged from the same evolutionary logic. Protect your pair bond, because your pair bond protects your survival. That's not X. That's not insecurity or possessiveness or a failure of character. That's a biological system doing exactly what it was designed to do. So why does jealousy feel the way it does? Not just cognitively. Why is it physically painful? The neuroscience here is striking. Studies using fMRI imaging have found that social pain, rejection, exclusion, the threat of losing a bond, activates overlapping neural circuits with physical pain. The same regions of the brain that process a burn or a broken bone register the threat of losing a significant relationship. This is not metaphor. Heartbreak is not a poetic description. It is a neurological reality. And from an evolutionary standpoint, this makes complete sense. If the loss of a key social bond, a partner, a tribe, a primary alliance, was as dangerous to your survival as a physical injury, then your brain treating these two categories of threat similarly was adaptive. It meant you took both seriously. It meant you acted to prevent both with comparable urgency. Jealousy, then, is the early warning system. It is pain arriving before the loss, a signal designed to motivate action before the damage becomes irreversible. The problem, and this is worth sitting with, is that the same system that was protecting human lives for hundreds of thousands of years is now generating that same emergency pain response in situations where the actual risk is vastly lower than the feeling suggests. Your nervous system does not distinguish between my partner is forming a genuine competing bond that threatens my survival and my partner liked someone's photo at midnight. It treats both as if they are the same category of threat, because in the Pleistocene they may have been. Jealousy didn't stay in the realm of private emotion. Across human history, societies attempted to institutionalize it, to build structures that would manage, channel, or suppress the survival alarm by making pair bonds legally, religiously, or socially binding. Marriage, in its earliest documented forms, was not primarily a romantic institution. Archaeological and anthropological evidence from Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and early Indus Valley civilizations suggests that the first formal pair bonding contracts were economic agreements, resource-sharing arrangements that specified obligations, lineage rights, and the conditions under which a bond could be dissolved. What these institutions were managing, underneath the law and the ceremony, was jealousy. Not as a feeling, but as a social force, one powerful enough to destabilize communities, trigger violence, and fracture the alliances that small societies depended on. The rituals varied. The underlying logic was remarkably consistent. Humans universally recognized that this emotion was powerful enough to require collective management, that leaving it entirely unstructured was dangerous. And yet, and this is the irony, no formal institution has ever fully contained it, because you cannot build a legal or social structure that reaches into the limbic system and reprograms the alarm. This brings us back to the present and to the specific way that modern dating technology has collided with an ancient system. Dating apps, by design, are optimized for one thing: displaying as many potential alternatives as possible. Swipe left, swipe right, a continuous parade of options. From a product design standpoint, this is logical. From a neuroscience standpoint, this is introducing a constant, low-grade threat signal into the pair bonding system of every person who uses it. Your jealousy architecture evolved in a world of 30 people. You are now operating in a world where your phone can theoretically show your partner 3 million alternatives in an afternoon. The threat detection system sees this and interprets it not as an abstract statistic, but as a direct survival threat. This is why so many people describe dating apps as producing a specific kind of anxiety that feels different from other kinds of social stress. More physical, more urgent, harder to reason away. You cannot argue with a biological alarm that old. You can only understand what it's doing and why. If this kind of thinking is landing for you, if the evolutionary lens is shifting how you understand your own experience, hitting subscribe helps this channel keep going. That's the one ask. Back to the story. Here is the part the science cannot yet fully answer. We know jealousy is ancient. We know it is cross-cultural and cross-species. We have a solid, functional account of what it was doing in our ancestral environment. What we don't yet know, what is genuinely actively contested in evolutionary psychology, behavioral neuroscience, and anthropology, is whether jealousy is primarily a feature or primarily a liability in modern human life. There are serious researchers who argue that understanding jealousy's evolutionary origins should help us manage it more skillfully, that naming it as a biological alarm rather than a moral failure reduces its power. There are equally serious researchers who argue that the mismatch between our ancient jealousy architecture and our modern social environment is so severe that the emotion now produces more harm than protection, that it drives more conflict, more controlling behavior, more psychological suffering than it prevents. The honest answer is, we don't know yet, and we may not know for a long time. What we do know is that treating jealousy as simply a character flaw, something to be ashamed of, something that marks you as insecure, ignores the 200,000 years of history behind it, and ignoring history tends to make things worse. Go back to that party. You're across the room. Your partner is laughing at something, with someone, and that feeling moves through your chest again. The tightening, the heat. Only now you know what you're actually feeling. You're feeling 200,000 years of human survival instinct firing exactly the way it was designed to fire. You're feeling the same alarm system that kept your ancestors alive in small cold camps on the other side of history. The same biological circuitry that made sure the bonds your species depended on were protected, guarded, taken seriously. The alarm is ancient. The party is new. And your nervous system, doing the only thing it knows how to do, is treating the present moment as if the stakes are what they once were. You aren't broken. You aren't weak. You aren't failing at emotional maturity. You are a prehistoric human at a party, holding a drink, watching the people who matter, and feeling exactly what your species was built to feel. The next time that tightening comes, you don't have to obey it. But maybe you don't have to be ashamed of it either. It's older than language, older than marriage, older than love as a concept. It's just your body, still trying, after all this time, to keep you safe.